Good morning and welcome to the Tuesday, October the 12th edition of the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. Dr. John Warren, publisher of the San Diego Voice and Viewpoint, and Katrina Hassan Hamilton, the West Coast writer for the Muslim Journal and contributing writer to the San Diego Voice and Viewpoint, will join us this morning to speak about a topic that is of concern to us all: another knee on the neck, this time involving a 14-year-old Black female student. We will speak this morning with Dr. John Warren and Katrina Hassan Hamilton. But first, of course, let us bring you the headlines on this Tuesday morning. Refuting the misinformation that's promulgated over social media and in the Republican circles, President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris have released a fact sheet proving that the administration remains committed to historically Black colleges and universities. Particularly irritating to the administration was an Associated Press report that President Biden cut funding to HBCUs from $45 billion to $2 billion. Pastor Jamal Bryant falsely claimed that the administration sought to defund HBCUs, but he later retracted those comments. And quote from the fact sheet says, "In the face of discrimination against Black Americans by many institutions of higher education, HBCUs fostered academic excellence and created pathways to opportunities for Black students throughout our nation." Administration officials said HBCUs vary in size and academic focus and serve as a range of diverse students and communities in urban, rural, and suburban settings. HBCU graduates are leaders in every field and include barrier-breaking public servants, scientists, artists, lawyers, engineers, educators, and business owners. They also include members of the White House. The Vice President herself, Kamala Harris, is an HBCU graduate, and the director of the White House Office of Public Engagement, Cedric Richmond, is also an HBCU graduate. And let it be known, we will have the director of the White House Office of Public Engagement, Cedric Richmond, on this very program tomorrow morning beginning at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And Cedric Richmond will also do a special live stream with the NNPA publishers tomorrow as well. Also in the news this morning, at 6 years old, Kendall Ray Johnson has not only become the youngest certified farmer in Georgia, but also the youngest Black farmer in the state. Her knack for planting the seeds of fruits and vegetables began when she was just 3 years old. Her curiosity for watching things grow stemmed from her great-grandmother, Laura Kate Williams. She started to see it go from a seed to a plant and then die and come back. She saw the plant life cycle of that and was like, wow, Kendall Ray's mom exclaimed. Kendall Ray's budding vegetable garden led to the start of her farming business called A Grow Culture. And eventually she became a certified farmer in the state now. She has become a local symbol for young farmers. And last week, the city of Fulton, or South Fulton, where she lives, declared September 28th Kendall Ray Appreciation Day for her work in her gardens. Congratulations to Kendall Ray. Well, we've seen it, and we've seen it over and over again. Of course, the vivid memories of George Floyd will never go away. The officer, Derek Chauvin's knee on his neck until he took his last breath. Well, it's still happening. And here this morning to talk about an incident that has gone basically under the radar in San Diego, in the San Diego area, is Dr. John Warren, who's the publisher of the San Diego Voice and Viewpoint, and Katrina Hassan Hamilton, who is the West Coast writer for the Muslim Journal and contributing writer to the San Diego Voice and Viewpoint. I want to say good morning, Dr. Warren and Katrina Hassan Hamilton. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Stacey.
Thanks for joining us. So let's just get started. Katrina, you wrote the story, brought to the attention of the Black press, the situation out there in the San Diego area. I'm gonna let you walk our viewers through it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brown, and acknowledging again Dr. Warren. This story first broke in, or was featured in the San Diego Voice and Viewpoint to acknowledge what has happened, which took place on August 31st, where two African-American 14-year-olds, ninth graders, were initially fighting. We later found out that these young ladies were both resided in a group home together. So these two young women were fighting, and it was already short-staffed, which we learned from the report as well. But nonetheless, two young women fighting. Campus security supervisor runs over towards the fight. He breaks up the fight. A volunteer comes over and asks if he can assist a Black male. So he takes care of the one student, and this man is on top of this other student. He basically pushes her back, which, the district stated that it was okay for him to push her back to kind of de-escalate. But then what unfolded next was just bizarre. The young woman, of course, she's, just already in that mode. So she's trying to just kind of get this person off of her, and he starts hitting her back. It was later reported that he was upset over $300 pair of glasses that fell to the ground. So,
Yes, I saw that. Yes.
Right. And so as he's on top of this young woman, which when we see this, we think of, assault. We think of historical trauma, and not to mention that this is a grown man on top of a young Black female.
Yeah, what's her age, Katrina?
14. She's 14 years old. She's a ninth grader. She is 14 years old. This is her first year at the high school, right? And so as this man is on top of her and she starts fighting back, they put her into a hogtie position. I'll just get straight to the point. They put her into a hogtie position. His knee is on her neck for 4 seconds. We know that if a knee is on a neck for 10 seconds or more, you can literally cut off someone's circulation. The fact that the security campus supervisor was a former sheriff makes it all worse.
Yeah,
so folks are saying, oh, he needed training. How do you need training to treat children as human? And so, one of the questions that you've asked raised is, why is it that we haven't heard about this story? Well, in San Diego, we have like over 400 folks who are basically saying that he had to do what he had to do, and we're race baiting, and the parents are responsible for the girls' actions and all of these other things. And we're like, wait a minute, you have a man whose knee is on her neck, then 3 of them decide to hold her down.
Yeah.
And Dr. Warren, can elaborate, but the fact that, you'll ask us about the report findings is just appalling.
Yeah. And so we have a situation where, like you said, this is an ex-sheriff, right? And this is a young freshman student, 14 years old. She gets into an altercation with another student. Dr. Warren, is there any justification for the actions and we're going to shortly show that video that Katrina was describing, but is there any justification? Because as Katrina alluded to, there are some who say, well, what other choice did he have? Or it just happened in the moment because he was trying to get control of her.
Well, you have to look at San Diego, because some people just think of San Diego as a city by the bay and it's all pretty. The reality is there's 17 cities in San Diego County, unincorporated areas. There are over 500,000 students in 40 school districts. Okay. And the area in which this is more rural in terms of where this matter took place, the predominant community in that area is Chaldean. There are very few Blacks that live out in the county, if you will, in these different areas. I was a kind of a rural county resident for some 20 years because I owned horses and lived out there with them. So I got a close-up look at the people in terms of the scenario. My son went to school to the sister school to this particular school, Valhalla. And so we recently had Dr. Luke Wood, who's Vice President of Student Affairs at San Diego State, who released a study in 2020, I believe it was. And we named the study after the movie Get Out, because the study looked at and continues to look at what happens to Black students in school districts. And what we found was that the more rural the district, the greater the incidence of suspension and all of the kind of things that happen to our students. And the more rural, the less attention that we get, because the community is almost like someone living in DC and going to school in Prince George's County or Montgomery County, if you will, either of those areas right across the district line. But the way things are here, you don't even have those, the demarcations. I mean, people are moving and everything is fluid. So this situation, you got to keep it in context. We've had issues with the sheriff's department. So the fact that this person is an ex-sheriff deputy does not lend to any great credibility, because the sheriff's department has got its own problems. We probably have more in-depth custodies in San Diego County in the jails run by the sheriff department than any place else. And Sister Hamilton, you won't remember this, but several years ago, we had a situation downtown in the gas lamp where a young lady, because she spoke up when a policeman was trying to do an arrest, threw her on the street with a dress over her head, hog-tied her with her hands and feet, and they thought it was okay. And so, so we're in an environment here, and we had this a year or so ago at Mount Helix before the pandemic. We had another incident. And what we have is a continued disrespect for Black life and Black students. None of this would have happened to a white student under any circumstances. Whatever white kids do is considered growing pains. Whatever Black kids do is considered criminal. And, I just want to say, when I look at this, that, I'm a former member of the DC Board of Education for some 10 years and a former director for 4 years of the National School Boards Association. So I've really had a chance to see this matter across the country in terms of what's going on. And we've had situations in the South where the kids in elementary school were handcuffed and led away by white cops. Because
so Dr. Warren, I'm sorry to cut you off, but it sounds like it's a systemic issue in San Diego that's not really getting a lot of attention. And again, it shows the value of the Black press, because you brought attention to this. Katrina brought attention to this. And I want to just point to what Nicole McDaniel is saying. She says, sounds like the fact that both girls lived in a group home plays a huge factor in what happened and how they were treated. They have limited ties with their parents, to say the least. They are unprotected. Katrina, I want you to respond to that.
Nicole is absolutely right, Stacey. The fact that one of the students had an IEP, and the misuse of the physical restraint, is just alarming. But, I want to go back to what Dr. Warren stated as well when he talked about the suspensions and the expulsions. And let it be known, too, that the NAACP San Diego was informed that there was a fight that broke out 2 weeks prior when school first started with some Chaldean students, and the treatment was much different. There are multiple layers of racism that's happening at the school. The vice principal is African American. She had informed the principal, who is non-Black, that she should not allow both of her other two APs to be absent on that day. So number one, they were short-staffed on top of everything else, right? And number two, you have the systemic racism, which we basically call racial battle fatigue and racial traumatic stress. That's what's happening. Schools here in America are not designed for our children. They haven't been. And in 1954, it took 2 years for our children to be escorted into schools. And even then, they were turned away, and they experienced the racial trauma, the racial battle fatigue that's happening. And so what we see is historical. We see another form of turning our children away. It's no longer the dogs and the bottles and the sticks. It's the staff who were there. Sometimes it's even the peers, because if you notice in that video, Valhalla only has 2% Black students. And if you notice, there were all of these non-Black students standing around cheering it on. There was even a post where one student said, "Look at these ends," right?
Mhm.
So this is systemic. And we talk a lot about reparations. We talk a lot about, police reform on the streets, but we really need to start looking at what's happening in our schools, because
Yeah.
the suspension and expulsion and the hate, the dehumanization, what Dr. Goff calls, of Black children, our children are not considered human. And that's the problem. Our children are
Yeah.
criminalized. Dr. Crenshaw talks about that. Dr.
Yeah.
Morris, so we can go on. But our
Yeah.
children are not valued as human beings. And that's why we see what's going on, Nicole.
Yeah, and it's so interesting too, Dr. Warren. We on Black Press USA and on the NMPA Newswire, we wrote recently a story about a situation in Tennessee where kids as young as 6 years old, predominantly African American kids, were being taken to jail for things like not stopping fights among other students. And of course, it was a Kids for Cash jail for the kids, and the judge and others would get kickbacks for jailing them. So what Katrina is saying, it goes beyond, obviously it goes beyond San Diego, but it's a systemic problem. Why is it so overlooked? I mean, yeah, we know that there are so many issues in our community that we have to continue to bring to light. We have, of course, the Breonna Taylors, the George Floyds, huge situations that need it and receive the attention that it deserved. But we are still not looking after situations with our kids. It is not being brought to light. We talk about missing Black girls, missing Black boys. We talk about the harm being done to our kids in school. But when it comes to the kids, it seems there's not enough attention. And so that makes Katrina's article even more powerful in my view.
Well, let me just point out something here. Back in August, I believe, we had on the Voice and Viewpoint on our program similar to this, had a 2-series town hall meeting on mental health and students in terms of going back to school, the wearing of masks, and highlighting the fact that there has always been a shortage of school counselors. There's always been a shortage of mental health support for our students, as well as for the adult African American population here. And part of it is that the way this place is laid out geographically and the areas are so that it becomes very easy to become compartmentalized. Each little district has its own board and its own set of people. And you might refer to San Diego, but this school, for instance, sits in what we call El Cajon. It's another city. And so the fact that it's dispersed the way it is, this is also the city where we had a gentleman several years ago who had mental issues killed by a policeman because he held up a fountain pen or a cell phone.
Right.
And the city of San Diego African American community went out there, but it takes the NAACP has done a phenomenal job of keeping people informed. But these kind of stories don't get the coverage that they should. And Ms. Hamilton, you didn't mention it, but let us mention that they retained a law firm to do a report on this scenario. The report was 31 pages, and 11 pages of the report, the first issue that it was released, were missing. We went back and raised questions, and they added the pages, but they didactic the information. So 1/3 of the thing doesn't give you the whole picture. And we're about to go into court if we have to do a public records request. And they thought that because they had a Black lawyer write it, that was going to make it okay.
Wow.
Yes. Sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead, Katrina. Yeah, as we saw some of the images, but go ahead, Katrina, your thoughts.
My thoughts are, as Dr. Warren said, they thought that, by using this firm and having this young Black attorney come out and state that this was not racist in nature and that he needs to be retrained, because he didn't have the proper training to transition him from a law enforcement officer to a campus security supervisor is frightening. It's kind of like, we know that the young man in Kentucky who was the attorney general, let the officers off the hook who killed Breonna Taylor. So just because someone is Black, I heard this term off of that story. All skin folk are not kinfolk. So we're not going to go for that. We're just not. This was racist in nature because there is racial bias. We always talk about implicit bias, but there's racial bias. And the fact remains that our children are always treated differently because they are adultified, they are treated as criminals, and they are not treated as children. He would have never did that to a white girl or a white boy. Let's be clear.
How about that? I would love to hear from some of our publishers who are watching this morning. Cheryl Smith says that Black females need advocates. Cheryl Smith, of course, the publisher of Texas Metro News and iMessenger Media. Jackie Hampton is watching, the publisher of the Mississippi Link. We appreciate all of your thoughts, our publishers who are watching. We know that it is certainly aggravating to you as well. It really hurts to the core, the knee on the neck of a young 14-year-old Black woman, Black girl. And we do have body cam footage of this incident that we're going to bring to you momentarily. I want to go to what Nicole McDaniel and all of our viewers, please, your comments are welcome. Dr. Warren and Katrina are, unfortunately, we could say they're experts in this. And I know we could use that word, unfortunate, because this stuff should not happen. But Nicole McDaniel says, going full circle, she says, Stacey talked about the importance of HBCUs and higher education. We need more Black adults teaching our Black children throughout K to 12. We already know they don't value us as they should, and that's not going to change. Like she said, it's been happening since integration in the 1950s. And Fran Farr, down in Charlotte, good morning, Fran. She says this type of news must go into all of our markets. Thank you, Fran. It's great to see Fran Farr watching. And finally, I'll go back to Nicole McDaniel. She says, unfortunately, Black people can be just as unfair to our children, especially when they're in that environment y'all described in San Diego. I guess that's what you were saying, Katrina. Skin folks are not always kin folks. Is that how you refer to it?
Skin folks are not always kin folks, but we must state that and it was mentioned in the report as well, this volunteer who walked over to de-escalate the other young lady, she was not arrested. And excuse me, I'm so sorry. We didn't even mention the fact that this child was arrested afterwards. They arrested her for assaulting staff members. So right now, this child may very well be in juvenile hall. And because she's underage, we cannot get that information. And I believe a young activist by the name of Shane Harris he's not a lawyer, but he was, her foster care parents reached out to him, or her guardian reached out to him. So he's working on this case. We've reached out to him and he hasn't responded yet. But the fact that she was arrested, not only was she traumatized, but she was criminalized in front of her peers and arrested. But, going back again, there was a mention of the school counselors. I want to point that out. Mental health. If we had made sure that there were enough school counselors that are there, not just school counselors to check how many credits that you have, but trauma-informed school counselors who could pull these young women aside and talk to them, I think we would have had a different outcome.
Yeah, and I also, Katrina, let me stop you there, because isn't that what, when they talked about defunding the police, people got it twisted, right? Yes. There was no, we don't want to pay police, we don't want to give them money. Right. It was about what you just said. When there's a mental health issue, mental health professionals should respond along with the police. And in this case, a school counselor who I'm sure was on staff could have responded much better than somebody in law enforcement. We did show just a moment ago, and I hope we can bring that picture back up, the exact moment when that officer, that former sheriff, had his knee on her neck. You see it right there. This is and you mentioned, as greatly described by Dr. Warren and Katrina, basically in a hog-tie position. This is a 14-year-old girl. I have a 14-year-old daughter. I don't like what I see at all right here. And I'm sure nobody should like what they see here. So this is what you were describing. And we do have, I believe, ready the footage, some footage from that fight. Let's bring it up. Is the footage not, is it not ready? Okay. So, but go ahead, Katrina.
Stacey, I was going to say, as we're pulling up, there it is. Oh, well, as
that's
we're
not
pulling
it.
up the
That's the wrong
footage.
footage here.
Released by Dayton,
That's the
Ohio
wrong
police.
footage. That's one of the news topics there. But go ahead, Katrina.
As we're pulling up the footage, I want to just go back really quickly to 2 points. One is there was a comment that, yes, unfortunately, there are some Black folks who are not our kin folks, but there are more. As a group, Black people have been proven to treat our children as human, to put them in gifted and talented classes more so than special education placement and suspensions and expulsions, and to really make a difference. That's why we're working so hard to diversify the teacher workforce in K through 16. It just can't stop in elementary school. It has to also go into our HBCUs and our PWIs, our predominantly white institutions. But then number two, we need more campus security staff and school resource officers who are Black. Because that Marine volunteer, he was a Marine recruiter. And again, he treated that young lady as if she were human. So as a result, she was not arrested. But this other man, he essentially attacked this young woman because he didn't have to hit her back. She's a child.
Yeah. Dr. Warren, you're shaking your head. And we all know why you're shaking your head. Go ahead and verbalize it, please.
No, I mean, it's just that it's hard to get people who don't see you as a human being in the first place to treat you as what they don't see you. It's very difficult. And San Diego is still a tale of two cities, with the best of times and the worst of times, depending on what color you are and where you live. You could be in paradise out here by the bay, or you can be struggling. And we don't have departmentalized ethnic ghettos like you find, if you will, back east. And I mean, things are so mixed and dispersed here that all of this adds to the problem. So we just have to stay the course.
Yeah, and Dr. Warren, and I see Katrina's response to it, but the NNPA's executive administrator, Claudette Perry, is saying, are you saying that Black people in San Diego area are not outraged about this? Has it not been shown on local TV news?
I haven't seen it though. Ms. Hamilton, maybe you have, in terms of following the local more closely. But
yes,
again, they don't really know. They don't always respond, and it's kind of strange. Let me just say this in fairness to San Diego. Will Black Lives Matter? The turnout is phenomenal at every turn, so there are people here who are energized, but also there are infiltrators that have come into the community when these things happen. So then it's a matter of determining who's who with what's going on. And that's a topic for another time with you.
Yeah. And Katrina, Dr. Warren just said they were energized with the Black Lives Matter situation, the movement. And isn't that a problem, though? I mean, energized, it should be sustaining, right? Is it a moment or is it a movement?
It's a, hats off to the young folks who created Black Lives Matter, right? So essentially I would say that it was a movement, but a moment because of the fact that, like, in areas like San Diego, where Black people are not the predominant, race, it's only when, it feels good, right? This is a moment because it feels good. But then if you notice, right, and this doesn't take away from our Asian Pacific Islander community, but when the incident happened in Georgia, and now we're talking about anti-Asian hate, we stopped talking about Black Lives Matters, and we got a federal law that as a result of anti-Asian hate, and we're still fighting for this George Floyd Policing Act.
And this is something, Katrina, you're hitting all my hot button points, because we certainly you don't want any hate, Asian hate. You don't want people attacking gay people. You don't, any of that stuff. But it seems that when these issues arise, they do get priority and they get taken care of, right? Because you'll get canceled for Asian hate. You'll get canceled for what they say, homophobia. You won't get canceled for attacking Black folks. Claudette Perry, again, she says these perpetrators are not charged unless the public gets involved. And we see that all the time. George Floyd situation we would never have even known about it if some courageous young Black girl would not have grabbed her phone and taken a picture and decide to release it, right? And then testify. We would not have known. So basically, she was a Black journalist, really, right? She became a Black journalist in that moment. Ahmaud Arbery, you could go on. The situation out in St. Louis, in the St. Louis area with Michael Brown. These things, unless there's some sort of public outrage, nothing is done. That's a problem, isn't it?
It's a problem because if you notice too, I didn't mention this, but 2 days ago, a young second grader in New Jersey had her hijab, her headscarf pulled off. Now there was not out there. I shouldn't say there wasn't outrage because CARE, the Council of American and Islamic Relations, is working on it. But the fact that this young woman, and my daughter told me this, I walked in the house, she said, "Mommy," she said, "they pulled off her hijab." I said, "Well, was she's Muslim? Yes. Was she young? Was she Black?" I don't know why I asked her. She said, "Yes." So the fact that you have a Black second grader who no longer wants to wear her headscarf, where the teacher pulled off her headscarf, is traumatizing in school. Yeah. So again, anti-Blackness is in every group. All the groups that you mentioned, anti-Blackness occurs in the Asian community. It occurs in the LGBTQ community. It occurs in the Latino community. And until we address and eradicate anti-Blackness, we're going to continue to have these issues because it's not only a local or national issue, it's a global issue. It happens all over the world.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, we are over time, but we have two great members of the NMPA from out west. We got them up early, so we thought we'd spend a little extra time, but we are running out of time. But we did promise to show something from that altercation, and let's bring it up now. So that scene there, and to wrap it up, really, that scene there, Katrina, you mentioned about the teacher. You said he lost some the glasses came off, and that's when he got angry. We do see that, right? We see that right there. And then we see him essentially throwing punches, it seems.
Yes. Yes. He was fighting this child back. And you see the other person who was African-American de-escalated it in a more humane manner.
Yeah, right there.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah, it's unbelievable. Now you have
this is where they hog tie. Put in her in a hog tie position.
Girl. Yeah.
Holding her knees down now and arresting her afterwards.
4 people on a 14-year-old. 4 people.
Wow. We're out of time, but we're certainly going to be bringing you more on this. You can count on us. You can count on, of course, the San Diego Voice and Viewpoint, the Muslim Journal, bringing you more on this, and certainly all of NMPA. I'm looking at Fran Farah make a comment here. Fran Farah's with the County News down in North Carolina. She says, let's just be honest, all nationalities that enter the USA because they want to are better treated than African Americans that were stolen and brought to the U.S. And we know she'll have more on this. We know Jackie Hampton down in Mississippi, Cheryl Smith. Cheryl Smith is she's a soldier, so she's going to have something. And all of our publishers, we really appreciate them all. Black Press is nationwide. You can't go to any state and not find us. So stay tuned. We really appreciate Dr. John Warren. Dr. John Warren has been a leader in the Black press for so many years, and we appreciate all your hard work. And Katrina, you are fantastic. When I first read that story and you brought it to my attention, great reporting. Keep up the great work. We're going to be looking for more from you as well. On behalf of Dr. Chavis, we really appreciate everybody joining us this morning. And don't forget to check out the NMPA and the Black Press of America on TikTok at NMPA Black Press. And tune in tomorrow for another edition of the NMPA's Let It Be Known as we go live with the director of the White House Office of Public Engagement, directly from the White House. We're going to the White House, y'all. Cedric Richmond is going to join us. And that's a refreshing change, Dr. Warren. You know, the last 4 years, they didn't want us over at the White House. So we going to the White House, y'all. So let it be known, let your unique awesomeness and positive energy inspire confidence in others. Stay safe, wear a mask, get vaccinated, and we will see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.